The candle flickers, its flame dancing in the darkness, smoke curling upward like a ghost reaching for the heavens. The sound of scratching quills fills the air, parchment covered with strange symbols and circles. The faint glimmer of gold dust scattered across the table. A man whispers to himself in Latin, his voice trembling with both awe and madness. Vita aeterna, eternal life. From the dawn of civilization, mankind has chased the impossible. From the pyramids of Egypt to the temples of China, from Greek philosophers to medieval kings, all have shared one obsession, one fever that burned brighter than any fire. To conquer death itself in every century, there have been those who claimed to hold the secret. They called themselves alchemists, philosophers of transformation, seekers of the divine metal, the creators of gold and the conquerors of mortality. But behind their shimmering promises lay shadows, deceit, and the oldest human scam of all, the trade of hope. These were not just scientists, they were performers, mystics, con men, and dreamers, weaving illusions of power to control those who feared aging, feared dying, feared becoming dust. They offered kings bottles of eternity. They offered popes the elixir of God's own breath. And they offered the poor man gold, spun from nothing but smoke. As centuries passed, empires rose and fell. Yet the dream survived, from the Egyptian priests mixing mercury with prayer, to the Chinese emperors swallowing pills of death in search of life, to the European lords paying fortunes to men in dark robes whispering about the philosopher's stone. Humanity's greatest desire was also its greatest vulnerability. This is the story of deception wrapped in divine ambition, a story of greed disguised as science, and faith twisted into fraud. This is the tale of the merchants of immortality, the men who sold eternity, and the world that bought it. It began long before the laboratories of Europe, long before beakers and furnaces. It began when man first believed that nature could be tricked, that death could be delayed, that matter itself could be transformed by the will of the divine. In the sands of ancient Egypt, beneath the golden temples of Heliopolis, priests stirred glowing mixtures in bronze cauldrons, whispering sacred formulas said to come from Thoth, the god of wisdom. They believed metals were alive, growing slowly in the earth like plants. And if one could understand their cycle, one could accelerate it, turning base metal into gold, flesh into spirit, mortality into godhood. The earliest alchemists were not charlatans in the beginning. They were mystics blending religion and proto-science, believing the universe was a mirror of the human soul. That transformation of matter could mirror transformation of spirit. But soon, their sacred art became currency. Priests began selling potions of vitality to the pharaohs, claiming it would let them walk among the stars, live forever in their temples, and rise again each dawn with Ra himself. The dream of eternal life became the foundation of power. Every tomb, every pyramid, every ritual in the Egyptian afterlife was built on one promise. Death was not the end. It was a door, and if one paid enough, prayed enough, and drank enough divine elixirs, one could walk through it unharmed. But the real transformation happening was not spiritual. It was economic. A new class was emerging. The first scientific elite, those who could read sacred texts, those who understood the symbols, those who could convince kings that they held the keys to eternity. And in that moment, faith met finance from Egypt. The secret crossed borders, carried by traders, mystics, and wanderers to Greece, where philosophers like Zosimos of Panopolis wrote of divine water that could purify both body and soul. In his writings, he described visions of furnaces where spirits were melted, purified, and reborn. But these visions were more than metaphors. They became recipes for power. Greek alchemy mixed science with mythology, Plato's theory of forms, Aristotle's four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, all became the backbone of alchemical thinking. They believed if one could purify matter, one could purify the soul. But for every philosopher seeking truth, there were 10 merchants seeking gold in China. A similar dream was born under a different sky. Taoist alchemists searched for the elixir of life, boiling mercury, cinnabar, and jade in search of immortality. Emperors like Qin Shi Huang drank their potions. believing he would live forever instead. He died poisoned by his own medicine, his tomb filled with rivers of mercury, a fitting symbol for humanity's endless paradox. Across civilizations, the formula repeated, a promise, a potion, and a believer desperate enough to buy it, and so, alchemy evolved from a sacred pursuit into a profession, an art of illusion cloaked in symbols and secrecy. Every failure was explained as a test of faith, every death a miscalculation, every scam a divine experiment. By the time the ancient world gave way to the Middle Ages, alchemy was no longer the language of gods. It was the language of deception. It wore the mask of science, yet served the purpose of greed. Its symbols became shields, its laboratories became theaters, and its masters became merchants. They sold kings the hope of immortality. They sold priests the illusion of divine power. They sold the poor the dream of gold. And all they needed in return was trust and gold and a little more time. And so the stage was set for the greatest deception in human history. The promise of eternal life, not as a spiritual salvation, but as a commodity, a product to be sold, bottled and believed, because in the end, the alchemist's greatest creation was not gold. It was belief itself. The rain falls against the ancient stone walls of a monastery. A hooded figure moves quietly through the corridor, carrying a sealed scroll and a vial of crimson liquid. Candlelight flickers against his face, revealing eyes filled with exhaustion and obsession. This man, like countless others before him, has given his life to one pursuit, the philosopher's stone. In the smoky laboratories of medieval Europe, men believed that within nature's chaos lay a divine order, that through purification, through fire and prayer, they could find the one substance that could transform all things, the magnum opus, the great work, the key to immortality and infinite wealth. Alchemy in the Middle Ages was no longer whispered in temples or hidden in the sands of Egypt. It now resided in stone towers, beneath churches, behind royal walls guarded by secrecy and faith. Alchemists became both feared and revered, scientists to some, heretics to others. They spoke in a language of symbols, serpents devouring their own tails, suns and moons locked in eternal dance. The marriage of opposites, all meant to describe a spiritual process hidden within a chemical one. But beneath this poetry lay an unholy temptation. For kings and lords, it wasn't purity they sought, it was gold. They wanted the philosopher's stone not to transform their souls, but their treasuries. They imagined endless wealth, eternal reign, the power to buy time itself. And for that promise, they would pay anything. The alchemists, aware of their hunger, played their roles like actors on the grandest stage. They spoke of purification, but they meant manipulation. They performed elaborate experiments in front of patrons, burning herbs, grinding minerals, creating smoke and sparks that dazzled the untrained eye. Every illusion was another coin earned, another door opened, another believer deceived. Among these shadowed figures emerged names that still echo: Roger Bacon, Albertus Magnus, Nicholas Flamel, men who danced between science and mysticism, praised by some as visionaries, condemned by others as frauds. Roger Bacon, a monk of sharp intellect and sharper ego, believed that divine secrets could be revealed through mathematics and alchemy. His writings spoke of transformation, of divine light hidden in matter, but he was accused of witchcraft, imprisoned, and his works banned because knowledge in those times was a dangerous form of rebellion. Albertus Magnus, teacher of Thomas Aquinas, was said to have created a mechanical servant, an artificial man, an early vision of life made by human hands. His laboratory was rumored to glow at night, filled with bottles of living light and stones that whispered prayers. But behind every miracle lay mystery, and behind every mystery lay fear. And then there was Nicholas Flamel, the most famous name in the mythology of alchemy, a humble scribe from Paris who, legend said, discovered the secret of the philosopher's stone. He was said to have turned lead into gold, to have achieved eternal life, to have vanished from history, only to reappear centuries later, unchanged, walking the streets in disguise. Flamel became the perfect symbol of what alchemy represented. Not truth, but belief. He was a man who existed in the blurred space between reality and myth. And like all great myths, his story endured because people needed to believe it. As Europe sank into the dark grip of plague and poverty, alchemy offered hope. A reason to believe that suffering could be transcended, that death was not the end but a test, and that through secret knowledge, man could defy God himself. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. Alchemy was no longer just a quest for transformation. It had become a tool of control, an invisible economy of trust and illusion. The alchemist was not only a scientist or priest, he was a salesman of the soul. In dusty manuscripts written in coded Latin, they promised patrons the stone, the elixir, the hidden formula. They drew charts of furnaces and diagrams of planets. But what they really sold was faith. And like all good merchants, they knew faith could be endlessly profitable. Some were genuine seekers, men who truly believed that divine truth could be found through fire and metal. Others were pure frauds, moving from city to city, promising miracles, disappearing when gold failed to appear. The church stood uneasily between condemnation and curiosity. Pope John XXIV even issued a decree warning against false alchemists who deceived the faithful. Yet in secret, some priests and bishops funded these same experiments, hoping to unlock the divine mystery for themselves. Alchemy had become the bridge between religion and greed, between the holy and the profane, a place where faith and fraud could coexist, wrapped in the same smoke of incense and mercury. The laboratories of Europe glowed with the light of furnaces and faith, and in that glow, kings saw their reflection, eternal, powerful, untouchable. What they did not see was the cost, for every drop of the elixir of life was paid for in blood, in blindness, in poison. Mercury vapors filled the lungs of the dreamers, arsenic corroded their veins, and the price of immortality became death itself. Yet still they continued, because the dream of eternal life was stronger than the fear of dying, and the alchemists knew this. They thrived on it. Like merchants who had found the perfect product, they sold not what was real, but what was desired. And as long as humanity desired eternity, the market for deception would never die. And so, in hidden chambers and royal halls, in monasteries and midnight markets, the legend of the philosopher's stone grew. Its recipe passed down in whispers, in riddles, in books that no one could fully understand. And even as its seekers perished, the myth endured, because alchemy, like immortality itself, was never about finding truth. It was about never accepting death. The sound of crackling fire fills the grand hall. A king sits alone, his crown heavy, his eyes tired. Beside him, an alchemist whispers of miracles, of metals reborn, of gold created from dust. The promise is intoxicating, and the king listens, because he too fears the same enemy that every man fears: time. In the heart of Europe's courts, alchemy became not just a science, but a performance, the theater of eternity. Kings craved gold and immortality. Alchemists craved patronage and protection. Both needed the illusion to survive. They built laboratories beneath castles, stone furnaces glowing red through the night, strange vapors rising like incense to the gods of ambition, scrolls and symbols scattered across tables, guarded as if they were royal secrets, because in a way they were. King Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire was one such dreamer. Obsessed with the secrets of alchemy, he filled his castle in Prague with philosophers, magicians, and metallurgists. His court became a museum of madness, glass jars filled with glowing liquids, cages with strange animals, and rooms echoing with the hum of experimentation. He wanted the stone, the elixir, the divine spark, anything that could grant him power beyond mortal limits, and he believed his chosen alchemist could deliver it. One of them, Edward Kelly, arrived at Rudolph's court with a silver tongue and golden lies. He claimed to speak with angels, to have discovered the formula of transmutation. He wore long robes embroidered with symbols, carried books that no one could read, and he performed experiments behind locked doors. The courtiers whispered. The king believed, and soon Kelly's fame spread. He was called the English Adept, a man who could turn base metal into gold, and in exchange for this gift, Rudolph gave him wealth, land, and protection. But the truth was simpler and darker. Kelly was a master illusionist. He used sleight of hand, hidden powders, and chemistry tricks to produce flashes of gold. And when his lies began to crumble, he vanished, leaving behind nothing but confusion and debt. Across Europe, similar stories unfolded. In England, King Henry VI once invited alchemists to his court, believing that they could create limitless gold to fund his wars. But every experiment ended in failure, and every failure was buried under royal shame. In France, King Charles VI funded secret laboratories beneath the Louvre, hoping for the elixir of life, while his advisors drained his treasury, feeding him hope one drop at a time. The pursuit of alchemy had become a royal addiction, a luxury that justified deceit. Every monarch wanted to be the one who conquered death, and every alchemist wanted to be the one who sold the dream. But for all their ambition, the kings never saw the pattern. That the promise of eternal life was the perfect trap. It fed on power, it disguised greed as enlightenment, and it made the rulers slaves to their own vanity. In the cold chambers of their castles, kings would watch the alchemists at work, flames dancing in glass, metals melting into liquid, the air thick with mercury fumes and prayers. They would see flashes of gold and believe they had witnessed the impossible. But the true transformation happening was not in the metals, it was in the minds of men. Reason dissolving into faith, doubt turning into devotion, logic burned away by the fire of desire. Alchemy had become the mirror through which kings saw themselves as gods, and the alchemists, in turn, became their priests, confessors, and executioners of truth. Some paid with their lives when their experiments failed. Others escaped with fortunes and forged documents, and yet, despite every scandal, new alchemists always rose because power never learns. It only hungers. In Spain, whispers spoke of secret sects claiming to have the formula of eternal youth. In Florence, Medici scholars poured gold into furnaces, convinced that divinity could be extracted from the earth itself. In Poland, nobles funded philosophical laboratories that were nothing more than theaters of smoke and deceit. It wasn't science anymore. It was faith weaponized, hope industrialized, illusion institutionalized, and at the center of it all stood the crown gleaming with greed. The irony was cruel, for while the kings searched for immortality, the peasants who built their castles starved. While monarchs sought gold, their empires rotted from within. The kings believed they could buy eternity, but what they truly bought was their own undoing. Their obsession blinded them, their vanity fed the frauds, and the frauds built empires of lies. The alchemists didn't just sell illusions, they sold reflection. They showed kings exactly what they wanted to see, and in doing so, they ruled over them. Because in a world where even monarchs could be deceived, truth became the rarest element of all. In the centuries that followed, the fire of alchemy didn't die. It simply changed its disguise. From smoky laboratories and secret scrolls to glittering apothecaries and royal pharmacies, the dream of eternal life was repackaged, renamed, and resold. What began as sacred knowledge in stone chambers became a marketplace of miracles. The age of alchemists gave birth to a new breed of deceivers, charlatans, chemists and physicians who promised eternity by the bottle. They stood in crowded marketplaces, their tables lined with glass vials shimmering like jewels. Golden elixirs, silver tonics, each claiming to defy time, each one whispering the same lie. Drink, and you will live forever. The people wanted to believe, because belief was cheaper than truth. And in an age where death was everywhere, hope became a currency stronger than gold. In the streets of London, the air smelled of smoke and medicine. Men in wide-brimmed hats shouted about secret formulas. Women in rags traded their last coins for bottles of colored water. Some said the elixir came from Egypt. Others claimed it was distilled from the blood of dragons. Every tale was more elaborate than the last, every lie more profitable. But the deception ran deeper than street stalls. Behind the curtain of royal courts, philosophical physicians continued the work of the alchemists. They spoke in coded words, wore velvet robes, and promised the same old miracle to new masters in France. One such man, Jacques Coeur, sold his king a potion said to restore youth. It was a blend of herbs, mercury, and crushed pearls, a deadly mix disguised as divine medicine. The king drank it and within weeks fell ill, his body failing as the physician vanished with the chest of gold. Across Europe, these immortality merchants became legends, some hailed as geniuses, others burned as witches. Yet all of them shared one truth: they understood human desire better than any scientist ever could. In China, emperors swallowed pills made from jade and cinnabar, believing they would achieve divine ascension. Yet those same potions poisoned them slowly. Their pursuit of life became their death, a cosmic joke written in mercury and pride. From Persia to Venice, from monasteries to back alley labs, the market of immortality thrived, built on the one weakness that no empire could conquer: the fear of endings. And as time moved forward, the illusion evolved. Alchemy became chemistry, potions became tonics, magic became medicine. Yet the story stayed the same. The salesman changed clothes, the promise stayed eternal. In the 18th century, Parisian salons filled with aristocrats drinking aurum potabile, liquid gold, a so-called elixir of health, prepared by men who spoke with divine conviction. They charged fortunes for a taste of salvation, and no one dared question, because questioning meant facing mortality. The alchemists had built an empire of belief, and centuries later, their heirs built the pharmaceutical one. The line between miracle and manipulation blurred. The same greed that drove Crassus, the same vanity that blinded kings, now flowed through glass bottles and printed labels. Even today, echoes remain: the supplements that promise youth, the serums that promise immortality, the slogans that whisper, "Defy age, live forever." It's the same story, rewritten for modern ears. The alchemists may be gone, but their illusion is alive, in every promise sold to those who cannot bear the thought of fading. Because immortality, whether in gold or glass, was never about life. It was about fear, and those who could sell it ruled the world. The dream of immortality did not end with a whisper. It died screaming by the late 17th century. The furnaces of alchemists had cooled. The golden light that once flickered against stone walls dimmed into ash. One by one, the philosophers' laboratories were abandoned, their notes confiscated, their names erased. Yet the hunger they had awakened refused to die. Science began to rise from the bones of mysticism. Men like Boyle and Newton took the flame that alchemists guarded and gave it a new shape. A cleaner name: chemistry, reason, order. But hidden within their brilliance, a ghost remained. The echo of that same impossible longing. Because even Newton, the greatest mind of his age, secretly practiced alchemy, scribbling coded recipes for the philosopher's stone in the margins of his celestial equations. He searched not only for truth in the stars, but for eternity in the crucible. When enlightenment dawned, the world called alchemists mad, yet quietly, it mourned them, because their madness had a purpose: to defy decay, to deny the one thing that humbles every empire, every god, every man. As Europe modernized, immortality went underground, no longer sold as gold but as progress, no longer bottled but branded. The miracle simply put on a lab coat. The 19th century worshipped machines, steam, and reason, yet behind the gleaming metal was the same desperation. New prophets emerged, doctors promising rejuvenation through electricity, scientists experimenting with monkey glands, elixirs and transfusions. Humanity still trying to outwit the grave, but with bigger words and better tools. Newspapers praised youth restorers, societies funded life extension research, and ordinary people believed, just as their ancestors had believed, in liquid gold. The form had changed, the faith had not, and in this new faith a new deception was born, not from caves or crypts but from laboratories and offices. Immortality had gone corporate. The 20th century sold it in creams, pills, and propaganda. The same alchemical lie wrapped in modern science: anti-aging, bio-longevity, cellular renewal. Every phrase a spell designed to soothe the ancient fear. But deep down, everyone knew the promise was still a mirage. because the pursuit of eternal life always ends the same way, with a mirror, and the quiet realization that the reflection is fading. Kings once died with mercury on their tongues, emperors with gold in their veins, and now, millionaires die with technology at their bedside, hoping their consciousness might survive in code. From the pyramids of Egypt to Silicon Valley servers, humanity has been writing the same story. Over and over, we build palaces, we build machines, we build digital heavens, all to escape one truth, that to be human is to end. The alchemists failed, but their failure was divine, because in their madness, they forced us to confront what immortality really means. Not living forever, but leaving something that does. The words, the discoveries, the ideas, those are the real philosopher's stones. And maybe that's what they were chasing all along. Not eternal breath, but eternal impact. Not the body, but the echo. So when the last crucible shattered, and the last flame went out, the dream didn't die. It transformed. It became art, science, memory, history. Every generation still searches for it. In serums, in faith, in data. But perhaps immortality isn't something you drink or invent. Perhaps it's something you create. Because to live forever is not to escape death, but to become part of the story that never ends.